Here she comes, straight to you on special request, Mrs. Robin Moon.
So tonight we're going to talk about night photography, and I'm going to share my screen in a minute. And rather than just call it astrophotography, we thought we'd just take you on a little bit of a journey of doing photography at nighttime. You know, when we say astrophotography, you really just think of shooting stars and Milky Ways and things, but there's a lot of fun that you can have at nighttime for not a lot of effort. So we thought we put together a collection of photos and stuff that just run an exploration into photography, into nighttime photography. So I'm going to share my screen. So we arrived in South Australia, and we had come across the border, and we had arrived for a couple of weeks. We were going to travel through the Flinders Ranges and then up to Aurora. And we arrived at our accommodation in the Flinders Ranges, and we thought, and Tim said, right, we'll go out straight away. So we did go out straight away, which was lucky, because the next day, that was the day that the South Australia shut down for 6 days, and they booted us out of the state, and we had to turn around and drive back across the border for a week before we could get back in. So we were really lucky to get this shot with the full moon, and it's very late in November, so you can see an almost flat Milky Way in the background there. But this is Tim's photo of the Casno tree and the dark skies. And if you ever hear the term dark skies, it means that there's no light pollution like you would get in Sydney. Therefore, I'm sure that most of you have probably travelled out into, dark sky territory by now, at least once in your life, and the stars, quadruple in amount. So that's the Casno tree. These are a couple more images that we took. A couple that we've taken. Both of these are Tim's images. The one on the right is from our Lake Tyrrell trip. Anyone that came to us with us, Carrie, I know you're in the audience tonight, came with us on the Lake Tyrrell trip. This is the one that we took over the Sky Lounge on Lake Tyrrell on beautiful clear nights. And the one on the left, what did you do there? Murruwinji National Park, north of Broken Hill. And I think Tim's done a medium stack on that. Medium stacking is good for stars. It means that you set up your composition, you don't move your composition, and you take 5 or 6 different images at different focal lengths and different shutter speeds or different ISOs, whichever you want. And then you throw those 5 or 6 images into Photoshop, and you click on where it says images and then down to medium stack. And it will blend all those 6 images together and give you the clearest view possible. That's the simplest version of that. Any more?
Shall I interject?
Yeah, you can interject.
I don't
have the patience to medium stack. I just want to do one good image. Tim likes to do about 15 at once.
She got something close. So the arch of the Milky Way, that's actually a 6-shot panorama to get the curve of the arch, because it's quite hard to actually get the arch to curve. So you've got to have lots of overlap and blend it and the like. But the one on the right has a median stack. Oh, can we go back?
Oh, sorry. Oops.
So the intent of the median stack is when you take a shot, you're at sort of 6400 ISO or something like that, and there's quite a lot of noise that's generated on the sensor. So what a median stack does is that what Photoshop does is it compares what's consistent in the image and what's not consistent, and then drops out the inconsistencies. So when you auto align all the shots, the stars are constant because they've got a constant bright light source. But the noise of space isn't consistent, which means that gets blended out. So the noise tends to drop right down, and the points of light are kept sharp, so you can get a sharper Milky Way shot. And you don't change the focal length; you muck around with ISO and shutter speed. So you get about half a dozen is a good combination. So you might go from 4500 ISO, 6400, 10,000. So you mix your ISOs up a bit and adjust the shutter speed to suit. And most of the time with Milky Way type shots, you want to keep your exposure time down under well, people say you can go to 20 seconds, but you get a little bit of star movement. So I tend to try to keep all my shots 15 seconds or less. I can get a nice crisp sky. So there you go. There's my interjection.
And I think, sorry, I just opened that. I forgot that I was still screen sharing. Carrie was asking about median stacking, whether it allows for foreground and background, but really it's just full background where you would take a separate shot for the foreground.
Because you will get the shot for the tree, for instance, on the left, that is a different focal length to the shot for the stars. All right, so you've got to have two shots to get the foreground in focus. All right, so when you're doing your astro shots, you choose the brightest star, which I think in this case, in the shot with the arch was probably, I think that's Jupiter up in the top. That was the brightest thing in the sky, so that's the thing you focused on. You're always manually focusing at night time, otherwise your camera will just keep on hunting and hunting every time you press the picture. So you go manual focus, find the brightest light scarf in the sky, focus on it, and then that's your focal length for the night sky. And then the tree was a separate shot, which we painted with head torches. And then I've just blended the two shots together. So I haven't changed the location of the tripod. All I've done is change the focal length. And if you like, what I've done is stacked the Milky Way and the tree in the foreground.
Okay.
Sequencer is fantastic, Melbourne, and it's another bit of software you can use. And if you want to get really serious, then you buy yourself a star tracker, and then you can expose for as long as you like, and you haven't got any star trails or anything like that. So there's lots of toys you can play with between star trackers and different software for stacking images. But as I say, the one on the right is it's a medium blend mode. So you auto align the layers, then when you blend it, you do a medium blend mode, and then that tends to tidy up the background, get rid of the noise, and for all intents and purposes and everything that you want to do with an image, that's probably good enough, unless you're going to print it a metre by metre, and then you can start getting a little bit more serious.
And that image on the left, you can see a little straight line above the tree, in the sky above the tree. That's a satellite. That's how satellites will show up. You can get meteorites low on the horizon that appear in your long exposure pictures, and you can get planes that appear. Planes will usually will be a dotted straight line, and the straight lines will be a satellite. Could be the space station. You can often tell where they are, but that's I'm not sure what that one is at the moment, whether that's the space station or not, the International Space Station or not. But satellites appear in your pictures like that as they move across. Okay, so I'll move across to the next. There we go. So this is a shot I took a couple of years ago up on Lincoln's Rock, up in the Blue Mountains, which is a really wonderful spot for shooting sunsets, Milky Way, night skies, everything. It's a very large, flat, rocky outcrop that's popular with a lot of photographers. I actually took this photo myself, it's a selfie. And I did a couple of shots of that. I don't attest to how fabulous the Milky Way actually is, but it was one of my first shots of blending, one of my first shots of blending a couple of lots of Milky Way together. After I had taken the focus for me and the rocks in the foreground, the last shot that I did, you have a zoom lens, which would have been my 16 to 35 mil lens. And then if you set it on the amount of time, the 15 seconds, and then on the last 2 seconds, you pull the zoom out so that it widens, the lens widens to its maximum width. And you don't do it too fast, you just sort of do it, well, it took me about 3 seconds to pull that out, and you will get streaks across your photos like that. And then I think I added in the little stars in post-editing afterwards, but that's just a rather fun way of enhancing what's already there in camera. Just another shot that Tim took in Arrowtown, Arrowtown, outside of Queenstown, New Zealand, when we were there a couple of years ago, staying on a property. It's just a really nice little shot. The Milky Way is not the best of it. You've got a little bit of
remote haze.
Of what?
Remote haze on the right.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's a single shot, hasn't been rendered at all, so it's quite a bit noisy.
Yeah. That's a blank slide. I forgot to take out. That's when I forgot to change the ISO on my camera. So we're going to move on to Aurora Borealis, which you find in the Northern Hemisphere. And I picked these two photos. Now, then neither of the photos are going to win any photographic contests. But you can see there's a rather fun story behind this. We had been in Iceland for 4 weeks, and we were flown from Reykjavik to Oslo, and then right up north into the Arctic Circle, into a town called Tromsø, which I highly recommend a visit to if you ever manage to get up that way. It was absolutely fabulous town. But when we'd been in Iceland, we hadn't actually seen fantastic aurora. And when we had been flying on this day, which was a really long day, all of a sudden we could see it outside the plane. So we were had our noses glued to the windows in the plane, and we grabbed our bags out at the airport and jumped in the taxi. And we got to the hotel room, and the concierge was saying now, he wanted to tell us about our room and about the room service and the restaurant facilities and everything. And we literally just said, is there a top floor? Is there a balcony on the top floor somewhere? We were just almost quite rude to him, because we were just desperate to get outside. So we flung our bags on the bed and rushed outside and up onto the rooftop here, because the sky was just going absolutely nuts, and we were pretty much virginal, fabulous aurora shooters. And so we thought we'd take a selfie, we thought we'd take a lovely self-portrait, but the two of us, we couldn't get in sync with either at all. So Tim had his Nikon set up on the right-hand side, and I had my Sony set up on the other side. And so we said, right, we'll shoot now. But, neither of us is paying attention to the other one. So we've got these bizarre shots. We're so self-absorbed in our own cameras that we couldn't cooperate for the other person. So I like those, because we were just like a pair of children, a pair of pigs in mud that night, because it was just absolutely beautiful, very, very beautiful. And we really hadn't experienced such clear skies like that. And northern Norway is quite a bit further north than Iceland is as well. So you're really up in the Arctic Circle, whereas it's only the top of Iceland that reaches the Arctic Circle, whereas Norway is well into the Arctic Circle.
So the interesting comparison here, though, is Robin's settings pick up the lights in the distance quite well, the reflections and a bit of detail in the lights on the other side of the harbour. My lights are burned out with my settings, but I've got more detail in the aurora than she's got. So there's the subtle difference between the length of exposure and how much difference there is about how much you pick up in the aurora. So I suppose in hindsight, you might have to take two shots, one that picks up the aurora to its best, and then another one that then picks up the visible light to its best on the reflections. So interesting comparison.
I don't think we handled the reflections too well that night, but they were very strong with those buildings across the lake there, across the river there, the inlet rather. So this is more aurora. This is probably a week later at a beautiful town in the northern end of the Lofoten Islands called Svolvær. We had been on tour with Jared Castang for a week or so, and then we had decided, we always liked Jared's tours, but they move very fast. So we had decided that we would stay in the region for another week or so and revisit areas that he had introduced us to. So this is exactly what we did. So the photo on the left is Tim's photo, and the one on the right is mine. We bought this. We stayed in this little hotel that had these little rawburas, which are fishermen's huts as part of the hotel rooms, but right on the river here. So when the aurora arced up at night time, oh my gosh, the reflections were just absolutely beautiful. Stunning to see. I did a lot of bracketing as well. The photos on the right, I did a lot of bracketing to try and handle the strong lights. So I probably could go back and edit this photo a little bit differently, but it's all right. It works for now. So here is the same trip. We're still staying in Svolvær, and we took a trip out to. So Jared had taken us to this lovely place called the Church at Sidpolms, but of course when he arrived, the clouds came over. And the fog came in, and we couldn't see anything over this lake. So we missed that with him, and we decided to take ourselves back one night. The skies were quite clear, and there was, the forecast of aurora was quite good. Jared had positioned us across the lake initially, and then we decided that we should walk in and try and get some close-ups of the church. But as we walked in along this road, so we just moseyed along this road, and as we walked in, we realised it was a school camp. And so we thought, oh, it'll be fine. We'll keep walking. So we got right in and then right around the church. And the snow was like thigh deep, which is why I'm lying on my back, because we were like literally taking one step at a time, like giants, and just falling, you know, thigh height into the snow. So it was pretty exhausting. But all of a sudden we realized that school camp was actually in progress, and we were actually trespassing on the land, I think. So we were creeping around like a pair of school children, because the location was just so beautiful. Both of these photos of mine, and the cloud just had drifted across right on, in front of the spire. So I just waited for the right moment for it to arrive. But I love this photo. I mean, I'm being ridiculous. I'm also tired, but I'm being ridiculous. But to me, I just wanted to immerse myself in the environment. You know, how beautiful it is, the pure snow, you know, the squeaky noise under your feet, and these absolutely gorgeous skies with beautiful mountains and scenery around you. You know, the pair of us, we just absolutely loved, you know, this night. So this was a lot of fun. I've taken these photos on the Sony A7S2, which is it's their best camera that handles light. It's pushing on an age now. It's probably about 7 or 8 years old, but they're about to put a 7S3 out, if I believe. But its sensor it virtually produces no noise, so you can push the ISO to very high settings, and so I can shoot very quickly, which means I can get, you know, less blur at nighttime as well. So it's a fabulous camera in the dark.
12 megapixels.
12 megapixels. That's all it is. Yeah, that's correct. So moving on here, hang on, Tim. I just check if there's any questions in there in the chat box.
Yes, I'm going through that.
You don't want to interrupt?
No.
Oh, okay. So I've put these two photos together to tell you a little about Aurora if you're not sure. So on the left is Aurora Borealis, and you find that in the Arctic Circle. And on the right is the Aurora Australis, and of course you find that down in Antarctica. It's the Aurora, full stop, is space weather. And it's not affected by anything on Earth. I can't even begin to explain to you about its winds and storms that happen in space, and they're triggered by emissions from the sun, and that's probably the simplest explanation. So the thing with Aurora is that when you get Aurora in Antarctica, in the southern end of the Earth, it's actually happening the same time at the northern end of the Earth as well. So what's happening in the north is happening in the south, because it's nothing to do with the Earth. It's all to do with space weather. The reason we see it differently is because on the left, this is a photo that we took in the little village of Spolva. You position right underneath it. Because you're so high in the Arctic Circle, you're literally underneath that space weather as it's happening, and you get this beautiful effect called curtains, which is what we're seeing there on the left. In Tasmania, where this photo was taken at a place called Goats Bluff, just outside of Hobart, you're looking towards the south, and because you're still very far away from Antarctica and the polar ends, you're looking sideways at the Aurora. So that is the view that you would see. That's the view that you see side on, and the other one's the view that you see underneath it. If you can plug into people down in Antarctica and the stations down there, they're seeing the photos on the left because they're underneath it as well. So it's actually the same storms. The magnitude varies, the strength of the pictures vary according to the distance that you are from the storm as well. And they're polar storms as well. So you need to be close to the poles. You won't see them in the tropics anywhere. This photo on the right is very sentimental for me. It's not particularly fabulous, but literally I was doing a locum down in Tassie, and I had been on this Facebook page, the Aurora Australis Tasmania page, and it's huge and it's wonderful. It's got all sorts of scientists and hobbyists on it posting beautiful pictures. The Aurora is very strong down in Tassie this week. It's doing well, and I think they're expecting another one in a couple of days. You get about a 3-day warning that they may or may not happen. So don't join that Facebook page, because you've got amazing pictures from amazing people.
KP6.
Hey?
KP6.
There you go. Yeah. This night. So I had a friend of mine had persuaded me to buy a proper big girl camera and recommended the Sony A7 for me. So I had literally gone into Hobart Town that day, bought the camera, and I had just copied and pasted all the settings that people thought that I should be using. So it was the 7S2 is on the left there, and you can see the ISO is actually really high. I was talking about before. It doesn't matter on that camera. So on the right, the A7. So I think, what was my settings? I don't think what my settings were. But bog standard settings was a 16 to 35mm lens. Had no idea. I had to use manual focus. That was one thing that I knew. I had no idea about how to manual focus. I could barely use auto. So I was really pushing it. So I was taking photo after photo, just fiddling around with all the settings. And when shot like this came down the camera and I saw it in the back of the LED, I was completely and utterly hooked on. And this is literally the first night of my photographic life and lifestyle. It absolutely triggered my love of photography for me this night when I saw these colors come through. What I didn't know was that it was a really, really good, strong aurora as well that they were having. I just simply got lucky. I knew nothing. And I got lucky that night because all these people in front of me are actually very experienced aurora photographers, and they'd snagged all the best spots first, and I had no idea what I was doing.
A little question from Claudia, and that's why did you shoot at f4? And I think that's probably the lens, isn't it?
It's the lens. That lens is the one on the left is a 12 to 24. It's a Sony 12 to 24, and it only goes down as low as f4. So you could, you're quite right, you could shoot lower, 2.8, 1.8, 1.4, whatever you've got. This Sony lens only goes to f4, and f4 will still give you good Milky Way and good aurora. You wouldn't be going any higher, but if you've only got a lens that goes to f4, don't let people tell you. It'll be a different picture at 2.8 than it is f4, but f4 will do the job. So don't get stressed when and succumb to peer pressure if you're told that you need to buy something less than f4, because you don't. And the picture on the right shows that. So the 16 to 35mm lens only goes down to f4 as well, and so these shots on the right will be, I think, taken at f4. So this is the same night. So I was such a rookie. I actually shot in JPEG all night. I didn't even know what RAW was. So this is Sony A7. This is 14 seconds, f4 at 14 seconds, and the ISO was 2000. I didn't know what any of those numbers meant really, but I had just sort of scoured the pages and copied what other people were saying. That the pink colors come up when you change the white balance a little bit. So that's why you see variation in the colors. To the naked eye, it can be that seeing the aurora, you can see it just as light, and often you see this come through the lens, but you don't always, depending on the strength of it, because it can be a minor storm or a major storm, space storm. And that depends what you'll actually see in the sky. And also if the rods and cones in your eyes as well will affect whether you see colors or whether you just see white light with the naked eye as well.
I can throw in something there.
Okay.
I'll unmute myself.
Oh.
So interestingly enough, men and women see the aurora differently depending on their eye structure. So the ladies amongst us, a lot of their eyes aren't as sensitive with the rod and cone combination in their eyes. So when we first turned up to Norway, I was out there saying, "Oh, look at this green aurora rolling around," and Robin was saying, "It's grey," and she couldn't actually see the colour. But once you put and the camera, a bit like with the infrared discussion last week, the camera actually sees a little bit more than your eye can see. So often you've got to actually set up the camera and look through the LED, because the camera will see more than your eye will. And if you're one of those ladies with a different combination of rods and cones, you may not see the colour of the aurora at all. So it really just comes down to what your physical makeup is there. But definitely your camera will see more colour-wise and more detail than you can from the naked eye. But we were seeing, so the really strong storms, so once the storms picked up in intensity and you had the dancing of the curtain and everything underneath, then Robin could see the colour. But if it was a soft aurora, she only saw it as like a grey cloud, as opposed, she couldn't see the colour, which was kind of interesting. But it's not unique. She's not alone. So apparently that happens with a lot of the. It tends to be a male-female thing with the mix of the rods and cones in your eyes. So there you go.
Okay, thanks for that.
You're on mute there.
Oh, sorry. Where am I going everywhere? Getting ahead of there we go. Sorry. So the photo on the right, talking about the photo on the right, I shot 1,000 photos that night. Had no idea what I was doing, and I knew that I had been reading up about how to focus on things, and I knew that you had to focus on stars. So on night skies like this is what you're doing. You have to shoot in manual focus. You can't shoot in autofocus, and you try and focus on something, not the people, not their cameras in front of you, but you want it behind that. So you try, if you have focus peaking on your camera, which I know the Sony cameras do, where when you look through the viewfinder, it'll come up with a little red dot. Anything that's in focus will come up with a little red dot. That's extremely useful on nights like this. So you use the manual focus to focus on the item behind, which is the stars. So fortunately, I managed to actually get something in focus there. And sorry?
Throw something else in. I would think what's happened with the left-hand picture is that Robin is getting shutter shake when she presses the release button on the shutter. So one of the other tricks, which you soon learn, is you've either got to have your remote with a shutter release on a cable, or you've got to use something with your phone, an app or something, depending on what phone you've got. And it's significant. There's a significant difference between manually pressing the shutter and using a cable release or an app. It just gets rid of all that little vibration and goes between being an image that isn't quite sharp to something that's really tack sharp. But you still got to go through all the manual bits of manually focusing. But once it's set up, just do the shutter release remotely with either a cable or an application.
Sorry about that. All over the shop. I'm trying to mute myself. Yes, so the photo on the right is an actual astronomical phenomenon that the Canadians some years ago, about 5 years ago, named the acronym of STEVE. They call it STEVE. It's not always seen. It's part of Aurora, but it's not always seen. And
you got one.
Sorry?
You got one.
And I got one. And I just thought that was what happened at night when Aurora happened. But apparently STEVE, STEVE, it's an acronym for Strong Thermal Emission Velocity Enhancement. See, that's how nerdy this language is. And it's basically an optical phenomenon that appears as a purple and green light ribbon in the sky, and it actually moves across the sky. So it was moving from left over to the right as well, and changing as the aurora came and went. Aurora is very fickle. It can arc up into beautiful colors, and it can be gone in 2 seconds later, and it won't appear for another hour, and then it can arc up again, and it can hang around for 20 minutes, and then it'll come back in another 2 minutes, back down. So there's no consistency to how it appears. So you have to just be ready for it.
Never stays in the one place.
Never stays in the one place. And if I had some decent video, which I don't really, it literally dances across the sky, and it's very beautiful to watch, particularly the Arctic aurora, the northern Arctic aurora. So that's Aurora. And yeah, so you can see my first settings there, the A7F4, 43 second, ISO 2500. And just damn lucky to have it reasonably in focus. So moving on a little bit, this is what you can do. So this photo on the right, I'm just going to go off technical a little bit and just show you why it's fun to get out and shoot at night. So this is in Tromsø in Norway, the photo on the right. And I just had a torch with me, and I had a little friend called Belinda who in my past life as a midwife, I had actually birthed her years ago. And at the age of 25, she developed terminal cancer, and she wanted to see the Aurora. And that was one of her bucket list things before she died. And at this time, so she wasn't well enough to get up and see the Aurora. So I was trying to write B with my torch in the light, and I was writing it very badly, as you can see. But anyway, so I sent that photo back to her and her parents afterwards. You know, she thought it was rather fun. She followed our travels around Norway all the time while we were there, and she died probably about 6 months later. But anyway, so I just sort of wanted to acknowledge how much she wanted to be there at the time. The photo on the left is a composite photo, but it just is an example of what you can do. So I had some nice Aurora there, and I had photos of the reindeers, so I just blackened them down. That was taken in daytime with the reindeers, so I just dropped the brightness on that. Makes it an easy cutout, drop in an Aurora in the background, and you can have so much fun. Here's another way that you can use silhouettes as well in your photos. So you can see I've got the same 3 cutouts that I've done, and they actually originated from the bottom right picture up on Palm Beach Headland one night when we went up, probably, it must be a year ago now, I think, because the Aurora is quite flat, the Milky Way is quite flat, and the Milky Way disappears from our skies by about mid-November. It's starting to flatten right out. And so that probably would have been about 9 o'clock at night. So I think we took our camera club up to shoot up there one evening. So we got that sky and that Milky Way, but I didn't like the foreground. So I just sort of shot the few people, and then I darkened them right down, and then I cut them out, extracted that photo, saved it. And then, of course, you can pop it onto a couple of different backgrounds as well. So that's quite useful in a nighttime setting to do it like that, just for fun. So here's another nighttime fun that you can have. This is bioluminescence, and I took this down in a place called Sandford in Tasmania. My mother's family is Tasmanian. We've got a lot of relatives down there, and my mum is 92. She's still got a lot of strong connections. And so Tim and I have travelled a lot to Tassie over our lives. And this particular trip, my older sister had come out from the US. She's a photographer as well, and she will join me on adventures when we have husbands that say, for goodness sakes, aren't you girls fed up with enough now? She and I will just take ourselves off on adventures, and we were doing this that night. So this is bioluminescence, and it is an algae called Noctiluca scintillans, and it comes to light at night. You can see where it lives in the daytime, because it's all red in the water. The water is pink as well, and it's very tidal. It'll get washed in and out by the tide. So if you've got an outgoing tide at nighttime, good luck with finding some. It's sort of otherwise known as red tide by day, but the sailors will describe it as sea sparkle, because it emits a blue glow, you know, when it's disturbed at nighttime. So people will get in the water and splash around and throw it around. It's fun to play with. The bloom can be really deadly to fish if it accumulates too much, but it doesn't tend to accumulate too much unless it's in still water, and it gives off ammonia as the microalgae die. You often see it a lot in areas that have bushland, as you can see on the left of this photo, bushland. So it tends to grow there, and then when you get heavy rains and it washes down into the ocean, and then there's hot days. So you get rainfall and hot days, and you'll often get this bioluminescence happening. You get a lot of it in New South Wales. You get a lot of it down in Jervis Bay. They're very fond of their bioluminescence down there, and we've got a daughter living down in Jervis Bay, so she often alerts us to when it's happening down there. This is nighttime, of course. It feels a bit, if you're a bit funny about getting dirty or whatever like that, it sort of feels a bit salty, and you can worry about it on your skin, but it's never bothered me, and I've never got sick, and I certainly haven't died from it yet. It brings out a lot of people.
That's good to know.
Yeah, I know. I'm still here.
There's a bioluminescence page, isn't there?
There is, there's Jervis Bay Bioluminescence page down in Kiama. Kiama will have it as well. If you get the Holy Grail, you can get people down in Tassie, they can get bioluminescence, Aurora, and Milky Way all in the one shot. They think they're pretty clever down there, which they sort of are, really. I'm a bit jealous about them. But they have a lot going down there. So this is film. My sister's on the right. She's quite blurry, enjoying herself because she's moving. This is film with my next. I upgraded to the 7R2, which I still have. Use it as my underwater camera. It's a really trusty workhorse. F4, 4 seconds, ISO 2500. The water is pink in that color. There's that white balance is not out of whack for this photo. That's the way that it looks when the luminescence is there. And that's the same beach, the same night, and I think I might have added a little bit of Milky Way in to sort of pretty it up a little bit, change the white balance. So that's noctilucent scintillans. It will pop up probably, it tends to pop up around about autumn time as well. So March, April time, you'll get, if you keep an eye out for people will often post of it. And I believe that the presence of it is increasing as well a lot, which is not really a great sign because it means that the oceans are warming a little bit. But nevertheless, for the moment, we're just enjoying it. Next sort of nighttime photography. This is glow mushrooms, which a friend of ours in our camera club, Jennifer, she put us on to glow mushrooms down our way on the northern side of the harbour. They're a summertime, they're a summer and autumn time object as well. The Omphallotus nidiformis, and they're quite difficult to shoot. You find them, they grow prolifically in a forest, and they grow around the base of trees, and they can be quite large. And they, of course, being a mushroom, they only last for a couple of days. So you need to find them by the daytime, and you need to know what they look like in the daytime so that you can come back and find them. When you walk through the forest, it's quite eerie viewing them because the forest sort of glows. And I'm talking about in coastal forest along the Sydney fringes. This lot were found down at Clifton Gardens, down near Mossman as well, just right on the edge of the harbour. So really nothing special. They do tend to come back in crops year after year, so they propagate as well. They're quite difficult to shoot. You can see that. So here I've shot at 3.5, must be the 7S2 maybe, with a lowish ISO, but a long exposure time. And this next photo is what you're photographing. So you can see that I had the ISO up high, 1250, and the lens wide open at 2.8 and a longer exposure time, 143 seconds, and it was way too much for it. So I had to drop all the settings right back and change them quite a bit. These mushrooms also, this particular crop, are going off a little bit as well, so they don't glow quite as well as these ones. So those ones are probably 3 or 4 days old, and these ones are probably about 2 days old. So they were giving a much better glow. You can find information about them on the bioluminescence pages on Facebook as well. They're a lot of fun to shoot. And if you're up for a technical challenge, you have to actually lie on the forest floor at night time amongst all the spiders and bugs. And our friend Jennifer that showed us where these mushrooms were, she came and shot with me one night. We went out for a couple of hours to shoot, and she pulled up one of her photos. She had a big fat spider lying right under one of the gills of the mushrooms as well. So that was an added bonus. So that's fun. They're a lot of fun to shoot. Moving along, we're going to touch on lightning now as a form of nighttime photography. So these are 2 pictures of mine. One is the roar that you can see on Sydney Harbour one day. Those beautiful big storms that come out, if anyone saw the last couple of weeks, I just gravitate towards them. I absolutely adore being out in the storms. Probably should have been a storm chaser in another life, but here I am in Sydney. I don't do much. We were helping our middle daughter move house the other day, and I was supposed to be babysitting the baby, 6-month-old baby, while she unpacked stuff. But then Tim and I looked out the windows and I could see the storm coming over the horizon, and I literally thrust the baby back in her arms and said, "See you later," and took off down to Bradley's Head. and that big, beautiful storm with the shelf cloud rolled in. So this was a couple of years ago, taken from the same spot, the photo on the left taken from the same spot. I've left all the rubbish on there because if you ever think about getting out and shooting lightning, this is what will happen to your camera when those in the Sydney storms where they blow up really windy and really crazy and you get all sorts of muck blown in there. So you have to spend a lot of time cleaning up the photo afterwards. I tend to shoot, you can use a trigger to shoot with lightning. A trigger will listen to sound and light and trigger the camera way faster than you actually can as well. I prefer just to put my setting on about f8 and I put it on, if it's on sunset time, which this was on sunset, then or nighttime, then I put it on for about 8 seconds at a time and I set it on continuous shoot. I put a remote control on and just set it on continuous shoot so that I don't have to think about, there's no way that you can press the trigger when you see the lightning because it's all over Red Rover. So you have to actually have the shot being taken while the lightning shoots at the same time. So continuous shots, have a clean card, 64 gigabyte of space on your card and just let the camera roll on and do its thing and then you can relax a little bit. So I just blended that. So that was a bit of a boring foreground there. So I blended that into the foreground on the right there over at Balmoral because the storm actually rolled back over Balmoral, but I didn't get any beautiful lightning at Balmoral. In this photo on the left, there's Tim. You can see a blurry Tim on the left there running around. I was standing under the toilet block in Balmoral and Tim had actually, this is a couple of years ago, Tim had actually forgotten to bring his tripod with him. So he was just a tad frustrated because he couldn't set his camera down anywhere because it was teeming with rain at the same time. So he was rushing around trying to find something to set his camera down so he could capture it to the moment. So I think I was the winner that day.
One of the benefits of long exposure, so if you can get your setting right down and get out to 10, 15 seconds, if there's multiple bolts of lightning, you'll get them all in the image. So instead of chasing individual bolts, you can get those shots where they've got lots of bolts of lightning and all happening in the image. They will be a long exposure, which means you can pick up more activity in the image over as I say, the long exposure, and you get all that interesting action happening. So you either go for the lightning trigger and get individual bolts, which is a bit of a hit and miss game. So actually, that next one that Robin's going to show us, that will be. The long exposure then has about 3 or 4 bolts, so they didn't all happen at the one time. They're actually a combination of the ones happening over the length of the storm, which then adds a little bit more interest. So different benefits from different ways of shooting.
Yeah, so this technique is, yes, the one that we touched on some weeks ago when we talked about just setting your camera, setting the composition, and then you can just continue shooting. Don't move anything in your settings. Don't change your focal settings. Don't change the position of your camera. Change nothing. Just keep shooting. And so for me, this sunset storm, this worked quite well that night. So it's easy to blend everything together in the end and just get, so all of those bolts were happening one at a time, but it's easy enough to blend them all into the one spot. That was a crazy beautiful night. If ever the coup de grace really for a lot of lightning storms is when it happens on sunset. Rainstorms on sunset are just beautiful, give the most beautiful pictures. This one, I cleaned up this one a little bit. I took this years and years ago, still on the A7, so 2015 I think it was, 16 to 35 millimeters, 7 seconds and multi-blends, and I put a bit of flood. Later on I put a bit of flood in front to pretty up the water because that was looking a bit different. So that photo did quite well for me in a few spots. So that's lightning. And now we're going to move on to light trails. More fun that you can have at night time. So both of these photos are Tim's. I'll let him talk a little bit about them. The first one we took at the pass outside of Queenstown.
Crown Range.
The Crown Range. That's right. When you cross over, if you're driving from Queenstown to Wanaka, you've got to cross through a series of, you've got a little pass that goes for about 25 miles or so to cross between the two towns. And it's quite high in some spots. So we stopped there one night to get the light trails coming down. And the shot on the right is Tim's version of Waroota Street at Kirribilli, where you can get the cars coming up there if you get a long, long exposure setting there. And I think he went out in the rain one night. He was hell-bent on going out and started pouring with rain. Didn't stop him, so he got this pretty bokeh on his photos as well. Would you like to tell me about the settings?
I can.
So with the image on the left, the trick with light trails is that if you've got a composition in mind and you want the car tail lights to go from one spot in your image to another spot in your image, what you need to do is sit and watch for a little while and count how long it takes the car to get from point A to point B. And if it takes 5 seconds, 8 seconds, 10 seconds, that ends up being your exposure time. All right, so that you can actually plan the shot. So if you want your beautiful S running down through the middle of the picture, then you have to put on a filter or do other things to adjust the light coming into the camera so you can get the length of exposure to actually match the design that you're after. So that's a little trick with the one on the left. And so you end up having to blend images because often this shot at whatever it was, 5 or 6 seconds, I think, because the cars are going quite fast there. That doesn't suit the sky. All right, so you end up having to take one shot for the light trail, another shot for the sky, and then blending the two together, so that night photography tends to be a lot of blending to get everything just right, because one exposure is not going to do everything. And that's similar to the one on the right. So the one on the right is the blend of about 3 different images. And the cool effect with the bokeh was that I took one shot completely in focus with the Opera House. I then put the whole image out of focus. And what then happened was that all the bright light spots in the city then went to these nice little bokeh spots. All right, so I took a shot out of focus, a shot in focus, and then selectively blended the nice little light spots onto the sharp image. And that's the way that you can get those to happen, because the bokeh really occurs in the foreground when the lens is out of focus, and that's when you get the spots of light become blobs of colour. So you can see in the background there that the red one sort of high in the sky is off the crane. All right, so take the shot, nice sharp shot of the crane. When you defocus, then that nice sharp red dot of the crane becomes a whopping great red blob, and then you've got some control as to how you can then blend one over the other. And then there's another shot taken for the light trails, and then I've blended that on top. So 3 images there to put all that together and to get the different effects of the different focal lengths. So that's the fun, where you can, if you blend with the focal lengths, because being out of focus is a bit of fun at times because you get some really interesting optical effects with your lens. And you can see even on the right there with the windows into the apartments there, where when you defocus, it ends up being a circle of light rather than the detail of the window. So there again, you can, when you're blending the things in, you can then choose how much you blend and how much you take, and you can play along with the composition. So there's a little cool background tricks on those. And this is taken on the same night. So this was a little bit. This is down at so the previous shot, I think, it's Beulah Street, isn't it? So yeah. Beulah Street is the one that runs. It's a very steep street, runs down from Waruda down to the water, and then I think it's Beulah Street Wharf at the bottom. So if you get down there, you get this fantastic view of the city. The trick with long exposure photography, though, is you can't stand on the wharf because the wharf is slightly moving. So unfortunately, you've got to stand back off the wharf and maybe have a slightly longer lens than your full wide one. And then in this instance, it would be maybe about a 5-second exposure. And the little wiggly lines in the foreground are the boats passing. So there are a couple of different boats came past. And at 5 seconds, because it was a stormy night, the cloud was moving reasonably quickly as well, so that sort of misty look you get in the sky is actually the cloud being drawn across in front of you to create the drag effect in the sky. So a bit of a fun one where you can play with the light trails in the harbour, just give you some interest in the foreground. So every landscape images are the most interesting if you've got foreground interest, midground, background. So in this instance, this shot without the light trails in the foreground is a little bit plain and boring, whereas then if you introduce the light trails, then you get an extra. It adds depth to the image because then you've got something in the foreground to then play with the receding effect of the mist and the light into the distance, into the city.
Okay, so we'll leave Sydney and find ourselves on Lady Elliot Island in Queensland. Lady Elliot Island is the southernmost island of the Great Barrier Reef Islands as well, and we went there for our 35th, 37th, 30 something.
I'll let you embarrass yourself.
No, not embarrassed. I'm just, it's 30 something. So it's 30 something plus.
You didn't remember my anniversary. Oh.
Anyway, might be 35th. No, actually, I think it's 37th wedding. Oh, I think it's 37 because it was a coral anniversary. So if someone can enlighten me what a coral anniversary is. So we had to go to Coral Island. That was it. So that's what we did. So this is Lady Elliot Island that you fly to from the Sunshine Coast, the Gold Coast, I think. It's a couple of hours in small plane off the Sunshine. It's very underdeveloped. It's an eco resort. It only takes something like 200 guests. It's very simple. There's nothing flash on the island, and it's absolutely wonderful. That airstrip runs the entire length of the island, and you have to actually walk across the airstrip each day to get from one side of the island to the other. So you can see sunrise, sunset, and it's a bird refuge. There's all sorts of seabirds on the island. I just loved it. I absolutely adored every minute of it. And of course, I couldn't even go to bed at night because I just wanted to be up with the stars and the light at night time. So this is another selfie of myself while Tim's back in the cabin and I'm out wandering along. The turtles, the big sea turtles, were laying their eggs, and we had to watch for hatchlings as well. So that was one of the other activities that you could do at night time, was just wander along the shores and watch out for little baby turtles trying to get down. So this is with my fisheye. I couldn't quite get it flat with the fisheye. I had to straighten out the horizon in Photoshop afterwards just to rectify it a little bit. And I just used my torch, my headlamp as well. So I'm just holding the headlamp in front of my body to highlight my hair and my face, and then just light the water as well. So that's a rather simple and fun technique as well, when you've got a really big frame that you have to fill and try and highlight yourself as well. So that's quite simple. The difficulty is if you leave the torch on for too long, you blow everything out. You blow yourself and all those highlights right out. So you really just need to paint for no more than about 2 seconds and then turn it off or hide the torch into yourself so that you can't see any more light.
Lots of trial and error.
Yeah, lots of trial and error, that's for sure. So this is a little bit more light painting as well. I made an error with this photo. I meant to go back and take it out. The one on the left, we're back in Iceland. And I thought we had painted the front of this is a little church, and the mounds in front of the church, just as an aside, are actually graves. So they have a permafrost in Iceland, and they can't dig into the ground to bury their dead. So they bury them on top of the ground and put the mounds on top of them. So that is what all those mounds are. They are dead people. So we were staying in a place nearby, and the Aurora arced up, and Tim and our friend Jeff Barton, we were at dinner together, and I just jumped up and went, "See you later, boys," like here it is. And so we ran out to this little church at Hoff and had this wonderful little while shooting the Aurora behind this. So I thought it was like a light painting photo, but it's not. Tim tells me it was light from behind us in the car park or something. The photo on the right, however, is still in Lady Elliot Island, and that is light painting. And you can see that I've probably moved the light too slowly across the front of it. So I was trying to find some Milky Way by facing across the other side of the island, but I couldn't really find any. And I've lit the foreground by moving the torch across, but you can see it's a little bit burnt out. It's not the world's best photo, but that's the easy way to light up the foreground when you're shooting at nighttime. So I'm going to move on. I don't know if is Nilmany on tonight.
I haven't seen it.
Okay, so this is our friend Nilmany, who came with us to Lake Tyrrell this year. We did on Lake Tyrrell. We did a night of steel wool spinning. I give credit to her because that's actually Tim and I'm taking the photo and Tim's doing the spinning of the photos. And this is a 2-shot stack as well. So we had everybody take the photo of the Milky Way in the first place. They took that shot, and then without moving after that, they adjusted their settings to shoot the steel wool spinning as well. It's a lot of fun. It's very easy to do. You just need to do it in a place. It throws bits of fire around everywhere. So you need to choose your location very well. Local, you can't really do it on the local beaches too well because you can't really light fire on beaches. So you have to be judicious about where you choose your spots. But it's a lot of fun to do when you get all the settings right with it as well. Moving along, we're going to visit Vivid at night time. So the photo on the left is mine, the one on the right is Tim's. And that's highly recommend if you've, hopefully we'll have Vivid back in Sydney again this year. It's wonderful to shoot at night time. You know, I absolutely adore, I'm not a big street photographer at all, in case anyone hasn't picked up the moaning about it in previous shots. But I do love nighttime photography in the city and in cities all over the world as well, because it brings out all the colours and the reflections. And if you can get yourselves out and away from the crowds during Vivid, I highly recommend visiting it because it produces some really beautiful shots. And you can see that we've both had quite a bit of angle. I think you might have had a bit of flood in there, Tim.
Mine's New Year's Eve.
New Year's Eve. Oh, there you go. So it's not Vivid at all. There you go. And that two sides of the bridge actually don't match up. If anybody that knows Sydney knows that it's not a cohesive photo. But there's a lot of fun to that. And you can actually you can see that the Ferris wheel at Luna Park is quite blurred as well. So it's just adjusting your exposure length times and your ISO time, your ISO numbers as well, to try and make sure that your highlights aren't blown out when you get long exposure times as well. So there's a little trick to that, to just shuffling around those numbers as well. This is a shot. So typically you will hear people say, never take a photo at full moon. Don't go out shooting astro at the full moon. It will ruin everything. Only if you think that way is what I think, really. We took our camera club up to Palm Beach for the night, and we had a lovely misty season. The shot on the left there is literally the full moon arising, coming above the horizon, just soon after sunset. I think it's really beautiful because you get the stars in the background. Nothing's been added in. I noticed there's a few dust spots I haven't cleaned up there. Anyway, it is pretty, and with it must have been a really humid night, I think, to get that mist in the background there. So I think that's worth doing because it's quite a pretty picture. And the picture on the right is another full moon picture. This is back on Lady Elliot Island. We had a little cabin that had a fan in it, but it didn't have any air conditioning, and so I often really struggle in the heat. And it was very warm at night time still, so I still really wanted an excuse to be outside and down by the beach. So I just dragged one of the deck chairs down on the sand, off the edge of the cabin veranda and down onto the sand, and set up there. And I think I slept there for about 3 or 4 hours in the end, after I had played around and taken all these photos. So this is 10 seconds with the ISO 5000 and f2.2 means that I'm still using the fisheye. So I flattened the edges of that out a little bit. Lovely tropical storms. What's nice about the full moon photos is that you get the stars, showing up in the background as well. It's very bright and it's very light, but with the clouds and the stars, I think it's particularly attractive as a genre.
Sense of depth.
The sense of depth. Right. Okay. There you go. Sense of depth. So he says from across the room. So this is a shot. This is another form of nighttime photography that, just a technique really. So this is, Tim and I were traveling up to Europe. We stayed up in Europe for 3 months back in 2018, and we stopped off in the UAE for a couple of days to stay with a friend. We went out to the desert to have a desert experience for the night. And we stayed at a beautiful hotel way out in the desert, and they put us on a nice little dinner at nighttime out in the sand. So there was this little girl who I subsequently discovered. Her name was Iris, and she was about 11 years old, and she had nonverbal autism. Dad, whose hand you can see there on the right hand side, she was very disinhibited around animals and things. She loved all animals, all dogs, and she just wanted to hug them all. So she was heading for the camel at warp speed, and Dad was trying to hold her back from just embracing the camel. Anyway, the camel manager said no, he's fine. Anyway, so I could see this moment, just this gorgeous interaction about to occur. But the problem was there was a freaking street lamp, as you can see on the one on the right, in the background that was going to blow everything out. So I was trying to position myself. I was trying to use the camel's head to block out most of the lighting so that I would get the lovely rim lighting around the camel and around Iris's hair as well. So I had to shuffle around a little bit, and when Dad finally released her hand, you can see the interaction that she had. The camel was so sweet and so gentle with her, and she just had, a minute or so of this, lovely engagement with it. So if you place yourself in nighttime photography like this, it's a wonderful opportunity for rim lighting. If you can somehow block out the strength of the light behind. I don't think technically they're not excellent photos, but they tell a very strong story. And you can see in her hair, the rim lighting in her hair and the rim lighting around the camel makes for a really strong picture. I actually had to put, on the photo on the right, I had to put a little soft blur haze over the light because it was really strong and sharp, and I just wanted to soften it down to try to rescue the picture a little bit. The colours in the picture on the left aren't all that excellent because I haven't worked all that hard on it, but I was more concerned with the story and the rim lighting. So you just need to, if you have really strong lighting in the background and you can see a story happening in front of you, just try and get something in the story to block out the major part of the light as well, and it creates some really beautiful effects there.
Hide the light source.
Hide the light source, that's right. So here we are in Prague, on the Charles Beach of Prague, and both of these are Tim's photos. So I'll let him talk about them a little bit. We had a couple of days here, and a beautiful city, and really worth always getting out to walk around at night time. So these two photos are the part of, I've got 5 or 6 photos coming up with travel, what to do with travel photos at night time. So I'll let Tim explain these 2 photos here.
Off mute.
I think that's the lead in from Robin. So one of the other things is when you travel, don't take all your shots during the daytime because you can get some fantastic travel photography at nighttime. And some of these old cities are just like theatres and stage sets where you can, you've got the fun on the left there where you can if you get the right exposure, you've got the people sort of misting through like little ghostly spirits wandering across the bridge, and you've got the detail of the buildings staying still. Or you can create your own little stage sets like something on the right there where you've got the view up to the cathedral on the hill. So, yeah, it's just a matter of, I suppose it depends on the city. Some cities you wouldn't go out at night, maybe, but we've felt quite safe in Prague, and being 2 of us, it's a bit easier. You can keep an eye on things a little bit if you've got 2. Someone can be running, a bit of patrol in the background and keeping the wide view. But so maybe I suppose the lesson is a bit like shooting stormy beaches in Iceland, or even out on the rock platforms in Sydney, shooting pairs. So that way someone can be watching what's going on, doing all the mitigating all the danger, and then the other one can be attending to the camera. So but Prague, great city, fun city. So one of our daytime shots, we turned up for sunrise because I've seen a lot of classic shots where you got that misty shot looking across the King Charles Bridge, and you got the spires just sort of sticking out of the mist. So we thought, well, let's give that a go. So we got up for sunrise. And it would have been about -5, -7, something like that. And we arrive at the bridge and we think, we're nice and early just before sunrise. And when we get there, there's groups of people at about 30 metres apart on the bridge. There have to be about 5 or 6 of them. And as the light rose, they're all newly married couples having their wedding photos taken on the King Charles Bridge. All right, so here they are. The girls are sort of dressed in their beautiful white gowns with their strapless tops and everything, and they've got so each group was about half a dozen people, and there was one person in charge of putting the fur on and off the girl, so she had the shot for 2 seconds before she froze to death, and they got the jacket back on. So it was quite an entertaining morning. We got some separate shots, which we haven't got here, of the bridge just covered in wedding photographers and brides and grooms. So a bit of a fun morning and a fun night.
So we're leaving Prague and we are heading for Singapore. So this is a shot. This is golden hour, which is a time of day that I highly recommend you utilising. So not at the end of the day in golden hour when you're travelling, you get a lot of people in shots. But this is actually early in the morning. It's about 5 o'clock in the morning. I had taken our youngest daughter Amy up to Singapore to do some research that we were doing, and I may have told Tim that the Marina Bay Sands cost a little bit less than it actually did. But I thought, when in Singapore, do as everybody else is doing. And I was busting to stay a night at this hotel. And I really didn't want to waste any of the time inside the hotel room. I just wanted to spend it all up by the pool. So I think I must have slept about 3 hours that night. And I got up really early in the morning, think I'd be first one back at the pool. But no, there was everybody else there as well, already just enjoying it. So in the golden hour, you get these beautiful blue skies, and with cities that are still sleeping, you get the beautiful lights as well. So it's always worth, I think, when you're traveling, to just get up really early and take advantage, because cities can look very grimy and grubby, but they always look really pretty when the lights are on and the sky is a soft glow there. Oh, this is another one in Singapore as well, to get out late at night and into these, I can't remember what these gardens are called. Everybody knows these gardens. They're so famous. I've just momentarily forgotten their name.
Gardens by the Bay.
That's it. Thank you very much. Gardens by the Bay. It's still about 38 degrees Celsius here. The weather is just hideous in Singapore. Doesn't matter what time of day. But it's beautiful at night. Don't forget that nighttime will give these beautiful reflections and just simplify your photos a lot. And I will rarely take photos of cities during the daytime, but nighttime it tends to bring a whole other genre to life. This is Paris a couple of years ago as well, just with a bit of street photography, just getting out. The same thing in Paris, the traffic calms down, there's less people around, you can get to see the sights, and wandering around at nighttime is just really pretty as well. So that makes some light trails across, I think that's the Hotel de Ville, just right in the centre of Paris. Oh, we got Notre Dame, which is now not Notre Dame, that's Tim's photo, both Tim's photos there on the left and the right as well. So more light trails, long exposure along the edge of the Seine there, gives some lovely light trails, and another shot of the Charles Bridge as well. Anything more about that? No? Okay. Back in London, this is, travelling, if we ever get back to international travel again, for heaven's sakes, I try not to worry about jet lag anymore. Being a photographer, I think it's quite useful because by the time we arrive at the other end of the world, we're awake a couple of hours. So we're awake at 4 a.m. and it's perfect time to get out and walk the cities and get some really beautiful shots into the cities before the people get up and before the light changes and before the lights turn down. And in Europe, they've tried to pretty up a lot of their buildings by bathing them in really beautiful lights. So this was London. We'd come back out of our first visit to Iceland, I think, and we'd arrived in London, and it was pouring with rain in London, which I guess as it does. But I'd seen someone else take this shot, and I was determined to have one of my own. So I wandered along from our hotel f20. I think the light was sort of rising a little bit, so I'm shooting I haven't got any filters on clearly with those settings. I think I've got f20 and 30 seconds and ISO of only 100, just to sort of try and get a little bit color out of that. But it's always worth, you know, using those couple of hours before dawn, and nice in a city, I think, when you don't know a city very well as well, because I never feel frightened out there. All the murderers, the axe murderers, they're all out about, you know, midnight, 1 a.m. They're certainly not out at 5 a.m. That's for sure. It's been my experience anyway.
Haven't met any yet.
No. There's another one. This is another pre-dawn one. Using the jet lag, landed in Amsterdam. I flew up by Amsterdam and there was a fog. So was it winter? I think it must have been autumn. I think we were flying up. So, and of course the canals of Amsterdam lend itself to some really beautiful reflections as well. So that's just a nice casual wander along there in the morning.
So we're 10 to 9.
Mountains by Moonlight. This is they're really beautiful if you can find yourself in some sort of mountain town. This is, of course, the Matterhorn, and it's I've taken out of Zermatt. We went to Zermatt for a couple of days, and I thought I'd treat Tim. There's a hotel right on top of the mountain at Zermatt, and its name escapes me for the moment, and I thought I'd treat Tim to a little surprise, and I booked us a night up there because I really wanted to shoot the Matterhorn. I'd researched all the pictures and you could get a lovely clear view of it in the night skies like this. Tim unfortunately developed a really bad chest infection, super bad chest infection, and he could hardly breathe. And Zermatt itself was high enough in altitude, so he certainly couldn't raise himself. We had to go up the hill another 1,000 meters or 2,000 meters, and he couldn't even breathe down in Zermatt anyway. So it was a non-refundable room. So see you later, Tim. I went up for the night on my own, wishing he was with me, of course. And when I got up there, it was completely completely and utterly clouded in. So I was a bit really sad. And so I must have woken. I had, you know, my cell phone auto alarm every hour of the night. And I think at about 2 a.m. I got up. And after having seen nothing for about 6 hours, I stood out the hotel window and there was this view. The skies are cleared and the moon was shining. And this absolutely beautiful view was in front of me. So
this is a good one to show you that infinity isn't infinity. You can see how the mountains are in focus, and they would have to be 3 kilometres away, but the stars aren't. All right, so there's still that subtle bit of focus that you need between. So when you're doing the astro, you can't rely on just being on infinity because your stars won't be sharp. So you've always got to take the 2 shots. You've got to take the shot for focus for what's in your foreground and a shot for the stars.
Okay, and so that's Zermatt, worth going to, worth making the effort if you ever find yourself up that way. It's very, very beautiful. It's very overhyped and touristy, but it's really very beautiful. And the last shot of the night is Salzburg. So we had arrived in Salzburg, keen to revisit it. We'd been about 10 years earlier and we were busting to get back because it's a very beautiful city, but it was pouring with rain. So we decided, we were only there for a night or 2 nights, so we decided to push on and just walk along the river anyway. And it was worth getting out. So not only do you get the lovely lights and the reflections, but the rain just makes very beautiful misty conditions. So this is Tim's shot of us wandering along the riverbanks here at night time using that jet lag. So that's it for our nighttime photography presentation.
And the end of our presentation.
And the end of our presentation. So I'm going to stop the screen sharing for the moment.
The whole purpose of these was just to use the time productively during lockdown, because I'm sure everyone was feeling it. But at least once a week it gives you, because we find even when we judge or when we present, that there's all sorts of different skills at camera clubs. Some people are all over Photoshop, other people need a little bit of encouragement, and others that just use their iPhone and have no idea as to why you'd want to get into post-production. But the idea of these nights was just to to sort of take the blinkers off a bit, just to show people all the things that you can do with a camera, and that then inspires you to have a bit of a play and a little bit more of a tinker, and just be a little bit more creative with your photography, and just see what other opportunities there are for you with the camera. So that was our intent, and by the continued attention or attendance at the nights, we've obviously hit a spot where people have been enjoying it, and just loving the opportunity to see what you can, and some other little techniques to give you a little bit more confidence to go out and play with your cameras.
Yeah, and we've got, if you visit our webpage, we've set up quite a few workshops for next year. We've just been, we're pretty excited because just as of a couple of days ago, we've been asked to be artists in residence down at Lake Tyrrell, Sea Lake in Victoria. So next May, we're heading off down there for a month to, they have a beautiful art gallery down at Sea Lake, and we're going to set up shop down there and just get there. And at the same time, we'll probably run another 2 workshops down there, so look out for that. Those are the Lake Tyrrell workshops, or the Sea Lake workshops that I know that a number of you have been to. So we'll be back there again next May. I've got a workshop coming up on the Central Coast at the beginning of December as well that I'll start to push. It's just a day-long workshop, and my niece is a dog trainer, and we're going to photograph dogs on the beach and with some flowers, and do some composite work in Photoshop, and just generally have some fun for the day as well. So I'll be advertising that one a little bit. What else have we got coming up? We've got
maybe some bats in February.
Oh, bats in February. If that will be very short notice one. I'm very keen to get out and shoot the bats, but it's weather dependent, so keep your eye out. It would just probably be a couple of days notice that we'll take people down to do that. We've got the Alpine workshop coming up in Krakenbach next June as well. There's a couple of spots sold out in that, so that is moving. That's going to be wonderful, staying at that amazing Lake Krakenbach resort, which is right on the lake, and we have all that beautiful alpine landscape right at our fingertips there. So that will be a bit of landscape and hopefully a bit of wildlife. We can find those pesky wombats and things.